I'm going to argue for campaigning for an extension from a slightly different, but I think complementary perspective than my comrade Richard. Firstly, I want to go back. A no-deal Brexit or any of the variants of a hard Brexit that are on offer will be a disaster for workers and for the oppressed and vulnerable. And that's particularly the case in the midst of the fallout from COVID-19. Now, as a socialist, I don't think we should talk about the economy in an abstract way. The economy, as it's presently constituted, is run by and for the rich. But it doesn't follow that the massive economic crisis, which I'm sure will result from a hard Brexit combined with a pandemic, is not a problem. On the contrary, workers and the poor will be hit hardest, and the Tory hard right will be working hard to ensure that that's the case. They'll also ramp up the attack on migrants and fan the nationalist fumes that have been poisoning British politics. I think in that sense, it's a dream scenario for them. Meanwhile, if that happens, we'll be even further cut off from the kind of international solidarity and cooperation, both labour movement cooperation and governmental cooperation, which is needed to tackle the multiple crises we face: medical, economic, ecological. Now, the Tories are desperate to avoid real discussion and scrutiny of all this, of what a hard Brexit at the end of the year would really mean. It's clear that already a substantial majority are opposed to the kind of Brexit they want. And since COVID-19, we are in a new situation. And in that sense, I think I disagree with Christabel quite diametrically. We need to delay Brexit so we can submit the huge consequences of what it means in the context of the pandemic to proper democratic scrutiny. I would say it's unfortunate that the leaders and most activists of Labour and the unions have, by their silence, aided the Tories' evasion of accountability on this, and perhaps more importantly, evaded their own responsibility to the interests of the working class. Even with the problem of the 30th June deadline, if Labour had campaigned on this, it seems likely to me that we could have opened up a severe crisis for the Tories. As it is, the fault lines in their own ranks have remained largely subterranean. Now, there are arguments in circulation, and Christabel's made one of the kind of clearer versions of it I've heard, that it's clever tactics to keep quiet and let the Tories hang themselves. But I think the Tory, it's true, their plan is not going to work out, and they're going to have a lot of problems. But as we've seen previously, the Tories having a lot of problems and tripping over their feet doesn't necessarily equate to a win for our side. And I think more generally, that approach of maintaining silence is a poor one. Silence is not a strategy for anything, and I see no reason to think this is an exception. I can't help but feel that Keir Starmer's strategy is an iteration of the same Brexit strategy that failed Labour under Jeremy Corbyn, and it's also indicative of a more general lack of fight against the Tories. I think that the people around Starmer, and unfortunately the decisions are being made by the people around Starmer, are scared of even minimally anti-Brexit. The irony of that being that even without political leadership, the repeated polling suggests that a mass of people already understand that a hard Brexit at the end of this year is utter madness. And that seems to include something approaching a majority of Leavers. That's why I don't buy this isn't an argument we can win. I've heard people on the left talk about the metropolitan elitist Starmer, blah, blah, trying to impose an anti-Brexit position on the working class. But in fact, if anything, the other way around is closer to the truth. Now, whatever happens about Brexit, we must get serious and step up our international solidarity to defend free movement, to build stronger cross-border links, to fight to level up rights and conditions and standards as part of the fight to transform Europe. But equally, I don't think we should see 30th of June as game over. Failing or not really trying to shift the Tories before the deadline is a defeat, but the deadline is not an immovable reality. It's a rule, and with serious struggles, rule can be changed. We should continue fighting to delay Brexit, and we should insist we cannot afford any more dithering. That's the only way delaying it is the only way we'll get a seriously different kind of Brexit, if that's all that's possible, and it's the only way we'll reopen the wider issue of Brexit too. And central to this fight must be a push to shift the labour movement on this, to get our party and unions to start fulfilling their responsibilities to the working class and to internationalism. Thanks.